Okay, since I didn't get to finish the problem 16 on the last video, we'll go ahead and finish it here. Okay, so if I give each term in the numerator its own denominator, negative 1 over negative 2, minus 10i over negative 2, negative 1 divided by negative 1, negative divided by negative, positive 1/2. Negative 10i divided by negative 2, negative divided by negative is positive 5i. Okay, and the last section here is going to be 17 through 22, solve by taking our square roots. Remember our rules here, you have to isolate your squared term first before you take your square root. So here, I got to get my n squared alone. So since my negative 10 is attached to the n squared, I've got to divide the negative 10. So I've got n squared equals 30 divided by negative 10 is going to be negative 3. Now, once the n squared is isolated, I can square root both sides. On the left, the square root cancels the square and leaves me with just the n. On the right, don't forget, you've got to put a plus or minus in front of your square root. The other rule, anytime there's a negative under a square root, you've got to take the negative out and you've got to put an I. So I've got a plus and a minus in front, you got to put an I in front, and now it's just a positive 3 under that square root, and positive 3 doesn't break down, so we leave it as the square root of 3. So n equals positive I square root of 3 and negative I square root of 3. Technically, we have two solutions there. 18. To get r squared by itself, we've got to isolate it, so we're going to divide by 49 since they're attached. So I've got r squared equals 100 divided by 49. We'll leave it as a fraction because now when I take the square root, it cancels the square and leaves me with just an r. If I square root a fraction, I want to give each term, the numerator and the denominator, his own square root. Don't forget, you need a plus or minus in front. So I've got a plus or minus. Now let's break them down individually. The square root of 100 up in my numerator, we should know, is a 10. And the square root of 49 in my denominator, we should know, is a 7. And 10 over 7 does not reduce. So r equals plus and minus 10 over 7. So the answers there are positive 10 over 7 and negative 10 over 7. 19, it's going to take a little more work to isolate my squared term. So we're going to add 9 first. So I've got 16m squared equals 40 plus 9 is 49. We'll divide by 16 to isolate my m squared. And 49 over 16 doesn't reduce, so we're going to leave it as such. Now I'm ready to square root both sides since my squared term is isolated. So I square root the left, it cancels my square, and I have just m. And now when I square root a fraction on the right, they each get their own square root. Don't forget to put a plus or minus in front of the square roots there. So I've got plus or minus. The numerator, square root of 49, we should know that is 7. The denominator, square root of 16, we should know that, it's a 4. And 7 over 4 doesn't reduce. So we've got m equals plus or minus 7 over 4. So the two solutions there, positive 7 over 4 and negative 7 over 4. 20, slightly different. Notice my squared term is this entire parenthesis squared. So I need to isolate the entire parenthesis squared first. So we will add 10 to both sides. So 3x minus 1 squared equals 2 plus 10 gives us 12. Now the 3 is attached to the parentheses, so we need to divide them to cancel them out. So now I've got x minus 1 squared equals 12 divided by 3 turns this into a 4. Now that my squared term is isolated, now I can square root both sides. On the left, when I square root, it cancels my square, so I just have x minus 1 left over. On my right, when I square root, don't forget to put your plus or minus. So I've got plus or minus the square root of 4 turns into a nice pretty 2. So I've got plus or minus 2. Well, to solve for x, I need to cancel my negative 1. So we're going to add 1 to both sides. So we're going to get two solutions here. The first time we're going to use a positive 2 plus 1, which gives us 3. The second answer, we're going to use the -2 plus 1. -2 plus 1 gives us -1. So we have 2 solutions for x there. 21, my squared is outside the parentheses, so I need to isolate my parenthesis. Well, it already is. Nice. So we can go ahead and square root both sides. When I square root the left, the square root cancels the square, so I'm just left with x minus 1. On the right, don't forget to put your plus or minus in front of your square root. So I've got plus or minus, the square root of 1 is just a 1. Now, to solve for x, I need to add the 1 here to get rid of them. So we'll add that 1 over there on the right side as well. So x equals, again, we're going to get 2 solutions. The first time we're going to use a positive 1 plus 1. Positive 1 plus 1 gives me 2. The second solution, we're going to use -1 plus 1. And -1 plus 1 gives me 0. So there are my 2 solutions for x there. 22. My squared term, I need to always identify where it is first. So this is the parenthesis with the squared. So that's what I need to get by itself before I can take the square roots. So I want to add 27 to both sides. So I've got a 5, x minus 2 squared, and -2 plus 27 gives me 25. Again, I need to isolate my parentheses with the squared. So to get rid of the 5, since he's attached, means we need to divide him. So now I've got x minus 2 squared equals 25 divided by 5. X minus 2 squared equals 5. Now that he's isolated, we can square root both sides. On the left, the square root cancels the square, so I just have an x minus 2. On the right, don't forget to put your plus or minus in front of your square root. So I've got plus or minus, square root of 5, that doesn't break down at all, so we're just going to leave him as square root of 5. So we plus or minus square root of 5 didn't break down at all. So to get my x by itself, we need to add 2, so that guy cancels. Now when I add 2 to the right side here, I don't want to put him at the end. I want my radical, I want my square root to stay at the end. Kind of like your i's always go at the end, your square roots are the same way. So if this is a positive 2 that I had to do on the left side to cancel, I need a positive 2 on the right side as well. So I'm going to put that positive 2 in the front, and I'm just going to slide my plus minus square root of 5, I'm going to slide them to the back. And since those are not like terms, I can't put them together. So technically my 2 solutions there are 2 plus the square root of 5 and 2 minus the square root of 5. But we can just take a shortcut and write it 2 plus minus the square root of 5.